when you start Harry Goblet and the, I should just stop right now. Harry Goblet and the Potter of Fire, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. What's the immediate first difference you notice?
We didn't start with Harry.
We don't start with Harry. What else?
We're in a location we don't know.
Different location. First three books all begin number 4, Privet Drive. Fourth book begins where?
Little Hamilton.
Little Hangleton at the Riddle House. Okay. Why does she do that?
I mean, this is kind of the first time that things are getting really dark. And so it's kind of a switch from like the, oh man, life sucks at Privet Drive to there's real evil now.
First three books are preparing us, giving us the introduction to the whole magical world, all that kind of stuff. Yes?
This is the hinge point of the whole series.
That's one of the things I've talked about before. This book is the hinge point. This is the first book where we see an actual death. Okay? We hear about deaths in the previous books. For example, Moaning Myrtle's death 50 years previously in book 2. There's a hint of death in book 3. Or there are possible deaths, that are averted in book 3, though there is reference to a mass murder in book 3, and it's only in book 4 where we, as readers, and therefore as participants in a way in the story, if you notice what she's done so far with the power of books, the power of writing, that you enter into those stories, okay? This is the first time we experience a death, okay? It's not, and I'm gonna give away some stuff for the end of the novel. Sorry for those of you who haven't finished it. I won't name this person yet. It's the death that we experience is, gotta be careful how I say this. The death that we see later in the novel, okay, is not a main character, right? Person's referred to in book 3. I don't think the person's referred to in book 2. Definitely isn't in book 1. Is referred to in book 3, and then we get more references back to that individual in books 5, 6, and 7. The book opens with a death, obviously. I mean, it's not like she's slowly building up or preparing us. It's just, 10 pages in and boom, we see Avada Kedavra, all right? So that's immediately telling us what? I mean, yeah, it's the hinge point. Yeah, it's darker. What else?
Anything can happen, anyone can die.
Say that again?
Anything can happen and anyone can die.
Anything can happen, anyone can die, okay? Within the fantasy world of Hogwarts and the magical world and all that, it's telling us what? This is real. All the previous dangers, first book, describe the danger of the Philosopher's Stone. It's kind of mythical, right? It's fantasy land. Describe the danger of the Chamber of Secrets. It's contained, in a sense. This one, not contained. And it is kind of opening the door to what we will see. No, that's not quite right. It's opening the door to Harry's expectations, let me put it that way, at the beginning of book 5. For those of you who've read all the novels, because of how this one ends, what does Harry expect to see happening at the beginning of book 5?
Massive deaths, massive headlines. chaos.
Terrorism everywhere, right? Death and destruction. And it's not happening, okay? Why?
I mean, why would it? Why wouldn't you let everyone can go on believing that
Okay.
they're not back? You know?
I mean, she kind of turns the paradigm upside down. So that we do see that, however, in book 6. I mean, book 6 is just, everything's going crazy. Okay. So, the Riddle House. What do we see? I don't want to go, because we have to get through a lot. Supposedly 2 days to try to cover all this. It's going to be more like 2.5 or 3. What do we see happen? Who are the characters? Frank Bryce. Okay. Who else? Wormtail. And I'll use my nickname for him. Voldy. Okay. Who's Frank Bryce? Why is he important?
He's the caretaker who's been taking care of the Riddle House for a really long time.
For a long time. Okay? A really long time. How do we know?
The whole town blames him for the Riddle's deaths. That long?
Whose deaths?
The family, the Riddle family.
More explanation. Who are you talking about?
His father and his grandparents.
Which happened when?
50 years ago.
Over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay? So Frank Bryce has lived there. He's been caretaker, essentially, of that place for 50 plus years. Okay? World War II veteran, hero, all that kind of stuff. Who actually kills him? How? I mean, I know Avada Kedavra, he has a wand. How? 2 questions. Where does wand come from? And 2, how does he hold it? What form does he have?
I mean, we see later it's kind of like almost like a baby, weird, like, yeah.
Baby weird, like, form thing, not fully human. You could just keep going and stuttering kind of, like that. Not saying that you're stuttering. It's because you can't really describe it. By the way, keep that image of Voldemort that we see at the beginning of this book with the image of Voldemort that we will see in the chapter King's Cross in book 7. It's the same image. Okay? I think at least that's pretty important. The more important question to me is, where does he get his wand?
We weren't explicitly told, but we can theorize where it may have come from.
Did Wormtail sneak back to the Potter's house after Voldemort did the deed, now 13 years ago, and find it? Did, when Voldemort disappear, did he kind of, magically, Oxio it with him wherever he went and stuck it under a tree? She never discusses that. In the novels, I don't know, maybe in Pottermore she does. I only stuck with Pottermore for like maybe 2 or 3 weeks and said, this is nonsense. But, she does, from what I've been told, fill in a lot of gaps in the stories via Pottermore. But all that's extra narrative, that's meta-narrative to this. As much as she wants it to be, she Rowling wants it to be part of this. It's not. It's not part of the published universe, so to speak. Okay? Why does he kill Frank Bryce?
Because he heard too much.
Heard too much? Why are Voldemort and Wormtail at the Riddle House?
In hiding.
Okay, they are in hiding. Why else? What are they talking about?
The big, huge Griffin, not, oh my gosh, Gryffindor.
The Quidditch game, because they're trying to come up with how to kill Harry.
Okay, their plot against Harry. So,
Not necessarily kill though.
pardon?
Not necessarily killing Death though.
We'll see. So, they're talking about the Quidditch Cup, page 7, 8, 9. And Wormtail says, bottom of page 7, it could be done without Harry Potter, my lord. There's a pause. Without Harry Potter. Question?
No.
Okay. So, he says, I don't say this out of concern for the boy. Boy's nothing to me, nothing at all.
So you're in his dad.
Hamlet has a phrase in relation to which play? It's either Macbeth or Hamlet. Shakespeare has a phrase, it's either Macbeth or Hamlet, where he says, the lady doth protest, methinks the lady doth protest too much. Okay, not the lady. Methinks Wormtail doth protest too much. He says 3 times. Has nothing to do with Harry. Why?
Yeah.
Okay? What did Dumbledore tell Harry at the end of the previous book?
They have a magical bond.
There is a bond. There is a connection. Harry's like, ew. You know, I don't want that. So, he says, any wizard. It is merely that if we were to use another witch or wizard, any wizard, the thing could be done so much more quickly. We don't know what the thing is yet. Okay? If you allowed me to leave you for a short while, I could be back here in as little as 2 days with a suitable person. I could use another wizard. That's true. It makes sense. Come on. Laying hands on Harry Potter would be so difficult. What does he mean by laying hands on?
Is he referring to the fact that Quirrell couldn't touch him?
No,
No. He's untouchable?
no.
Because he's so protected, essentially?
Look at what it says again. Laying hands on Harry Potter would be so difficult. He is so well protected. See, it's interesting to me that so far, no one has explained exactly what that phrase refers to. And I think partially is because whether you're aware of this meaning for it also, that's religious language. Anybody know how it's religious language?
I mean, well, when you lay your hands on someone, it usually means that you're touching them or praying for them.
Laying hands on someone in the New Testament, specifically the book of James, is how you bring about healing. Okay? Interestingly, we have that language here, and then in book 6 and 7, we have literally the words used, or the word used, converting. Okay? We're going to say once, we're going to hear, once so-and-so, is done converting so-and-so. Okay? That's only religious language. You don't convert from Democrat to Republican or Republican to Democrat. You change parties. Courtney.
Would this relate back to the opening statements you made about the Arthur, about the religious standpoints, where you said that she maybe talks about it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely related to Rowling's comment in that interview. If I were to tell you how my Christianity informs the work, I'd give away the ending. Okay. So, what's he mean by laying hands? He doesn't mean laying hands and praying for Harry. Kidnapping. That's what he means. So why doesn't Rowling just say, kidnapping Harry Potter would be so difficult?
Because it can have multiple meanings, I think. Because, I mean, also, I think it could be partially referring to the fact that because of Harry's mom's sacrifice, he's still kind of untouchable. That's kind of the whole reason for some of the things that happen later.
True, because it gets to what is going to happen
That's
later.
part of why he
In
wants
this book.
specifically Harry.
Exactly, okay? And he's gonna get to that in just a moment. So, Voldemort interrupts Wormtail, and so you volunteer to go and fetch me a substitute. I wonder, maybe you're wearisome of serving me. But he says, no, has nothing to do with that. My devotion to your lordship, Voldemort, is nothing more than cowardice. Okay? Well, who else already said something like that? Sirius and Lupin essentially said that. Okay? I have my reasons for using the boy, page 10, as I've already explained to you, and I will use no other. I've waited 13 years. A few more months won't matter. Okay? As for the protection surrounding the boy, I believe my plan will be effective. And I think the protection that he's referring to is both physical protection out there and the internal protection. Yes.
Kind of unrelated, could there be significance in the fact that he's waited 13 years, that this is the book where it happens, since 13 is supposed to be the unlucky number?
Could be. Very well could be. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's entirely plausible. In fact, it's probable, I think, come to think of it. So, they talked about Bertha Jorkins. Okay? And Wormtail thinks, Voldemort's going to kill him later. Page 11. Wormtail, I killed Bertha because I had to. She was fit for nothing after my questioning. So, what have we just been told? We have no idea who Bertha Jorkins is. But Voldemort's already killed her as part of this plot. Okay? Frank Bryce is going to be killed in just a moment. So we're going to see in this first chapter a reference to someone having recently been killed, okay, and seeing someone killed. The body starts to pile up. All right? The scar, next chapter. What's the real significance of this chapter? Is it that Harry's scar wakes him up and it's really hurting and he remembers a dream?
It establishes the connection.
Establishes the connection between Harry and Voldemort. What else? I think it's Harry's trying to figure out what to do about it. So what does he immediately think of doing? Who do I send an owl to? Or who do I send a letter to? Let's see, if I talk to Ron, Ron's going to talk to his dad. Find out if scars, these kinds of scars have after effects. What's the problem with that line of thinking? No one else has this kind of scar. No one else has survived this, okay? So throw that one out. Who does he think of next? Right to Hermione. What's she going to say? Let me go check in a book, okay? Hagrid. Dumbledore. I don't really want to talk to Dumbledore. Who does he finally think of? I go right to my godfather, okay? What's the danger that Harry doesn't think of in writing to Sirius?
Landing someone else's hands.
Okay, message could get intercepted.
That
What
Sirius
else?
might come out of hiding just for him and get caught and go back to Azkaban and that whole.
If Sirius comes out of hiding and gets caught, what is Harry going to think?
It was his fault.
My fault. And in doing so, removing what from Sirius? His volition, his free will. See, Harry does this an awful lot. Is that similar to any curse that we're going to be introduced to? What does that mean?
I don't remember the name of it.
The Imperious, the Imperial curse. What do you do when you use Imperio on somebody?
You take somebody's free will.
You take away their free will. Okay?
I mean, there's there's the caveat to that we discover in the Mad Eye Voodoo chapter. but-
which we're gonna get to, okay? And I'll wait till we get there. So, he just told them, Scar hurt. Talks about, it's happened, last time when Voldemort was at Hogwarts. If cursed scars can sometimes hurt years afterwards, okay? Next chapter, Harry gets the invitation from Molly Weasley. What's so bad about the invitation?
It's covered in stamps.
It's like a manila-sized envelope, entirely covered with stamps, with like a square inch for the address. What's the problem with that?
It's not normal.
It's strange and mysterious, okay? So he gets invited to the World Cup. Cool. Next chapter, 4. Notice we're skipping a lot. How do the Weasleys, George, Fred, Ron, Mr. show up or come get Harry? Come collect him for the Quidditch World Cup.
They attempt to come via blue powder, but the Dursleys had an electric fireplace installed, which, put a little wrinkle in that.
Okay, they actually do use flu powder, it's just they end up where? In the wall, okay? So, what does Mr. Dursley have to do to the wall? Notice he doesn't, take his wand and click it into laser mode and go, "Ooh," and cut a little hole out that they can walk through.
Blast a hole in it.
It'd be like blowing a 10-foot diameter hole in one of these walls, okay? Describe the Dursley house again.
Very clean, everything in its place.
It's called, the kitchen at least is sterile. It's like surgically clean, okay? So, Mr. Dursley kind of explains, Fred, George, Ron, go help Harry get his stuff. And they get Harry's trunk and all that. They leave, okay? Page 48. Fred, George, Ron. Harry's about to leave. Page 48. And he says, well, bye then. He starts going towards the fire. Mr. Weasley puts his hand out, grabs him by the shoulder, and stops him. Why?
Because the Dursleys
Because he's
didn't
a
say
good
goodbye
dad.
back.
Dursleys didn't say goodbye back, so why does Rowling include this? What's the point? How does this advance the plot?
In a way, it sort of establishes that Harry is gonna try to solve his own problems a lot, because he hasn't told the Weasleys how bad it is at
Okay.
the Dursleys.
Okay,
And then it also kind of establishes the good nature of Mr. Weasley, and kind of his want to for Harry to be in a safe and loving place.
okay. I think it's a lot more the latter than it is the former. We're gonna see and hear a little bit of discussion about this in a moment. And then we're gonna see in book 6, somebody else is gonna show up at the Dursleys to collect Harry. Okay? Dumbledore. And Dumbledore is going to do something very, very similar to what Arthur Weasley does here. And we've already seen a little bit of this in the previous book, because Harry tells the Dursleys what about his godfather, okay? And we're going to hear at the end of book 5, somebody's going to say something to the Weasleys, to the Dursleys also, okay? All of this, I think, is Rowling kind of getting up on her soapbox about proper parenting. Okay? Listen to what happens. Notice, they didn't say anything. Harry said goodbye to you. Didn't you hear them? Hear him? Mr. Weasley says, Harry, it doesn't matter. Honestly, I don't care. It's like, just let me go. You aren't going to see your nephew till next summer, he said to Uncle Vernon in mild indignation. surely you're going to say goodbye. Now, describe Arthur Weasley at this point. Physically describe him.
I mean, he's gonna be,
Probably got red in the face.
And he's angry.
he's covered in dust.
He's covered in dust and he has a wand in his hand. Surely, you know, the wand is equivalent to what in our world?
I'm good.
He's carrying a Smith & Wesson, you know. Surely you're going to say goodbye. Because all he has to do is.
Make it.
Uncle Vernon's face worked furiously. The idea of being taught consideration. Notice our narrator is telling us how Uncle Vernon interprets Arthur Weasley's words. What does it mean, being taught consideration? She didn't word it well, I don't think. Because consideration, for most of us, is a noun. And what she really wants is the verb, to be considerate. Okay? The idea of being taught to be considerate. What's it mean to be considerate? To think of somebody else. To think of somebody else's needs, wants, desires, etc. To be kind is another way of putting it. By a man who just blasted away half his living room wall seemed to be causing him intense suffering. But Mr. Weasley's wand was still in his hand, and Uncle Vernon's tiny eyes darted to it. Once before he said, very resentfully, "Goodbye then." "See you," says Harry, putting one foot forward into the green flames. It's like Harry doesn't even look back. Okay? But Harry turns around suddenly because Dudley starts gagging, you know. Uncle Vernon, Mr. Weasley says, "Don't worry, I can sort him out, etc. It's a simple process. It was the toffee." So, Arthur does what before he leaves? Well, he fixes Dudley, obviously. What else? What's he use? Scourgio or something? Or rectify? I don't know. And he puts everything back together, and then, does he go through the fireplace? He apparates, or disapparates, you know. So, Weasley's wizard wheezes. Fred and George get in a little bit of trouble. Okay? They want to know how big Dudley's tongue got. And what do we discover about Percy?
He's got a job at the ministry.
He's left school. He's working at the Ministry of Magic, kind of following in Dad's footsteps, right? Not really.
He's a lot more power hungry, and he wants influence and acclaim.
Who is he working for?
Barty Crouch.
Bartemius Crouch Sr., who, we're going to find out in just a couple chapters, was once regarded as what?
Candidate for Minister of Magic.
Candidate for Minister for Magic. Like runner-up to president, you know. And now he's in charge of,
The International Magical Cooperation.
yeah, sports, essentially. Okay? So, Portkey chapter. How are they getting to Quidditch World Cup? Taking a portkey. What's a portkey?
An object that when you touch it, it'll transport you wherever it is programmed.
Wherever it's programmed to take you. Okay? Can anybody make a portkey? No. You have to have approval from the ministry to make a portkey.
Technically, I imagine it can be done illegally.
Well, that's my point. It can be done, but just like becoming an animagi, you're supposed to tell the ministry, or for the portkey, you're supposed to get the ministry's approval. How do we know? Because we're going to see a little bit later,
Oh, yeah.
book 5, actually, not a little bit later, Dumbledore's going to make a portkey, an illegal one. Okay?
Well, I mean, there's an illegal one in this book, too, at the very end.
Well, yeah, we're going to leave that one aside for a moment. So, who do they meet up at the port key?
The Diggories.
Page 72. So there's Mr. Weasley, Fred, George, Ron, Harry, Ginny, Hermione, thank you. I forgot she met up with them too. In middle of 72, Amos Diggory, Merlin's beard, Harry Potter. He goes all, yeah, it's me. Sed's talked about you, of course. Told us all about playing against you last year. I said to him, Sed, that'll be something to tell your grandchildren, that will. You beat Harry Potter. What happened in that previous match?
He fell off his broom because a bunch of Dementors.
Because about 100 Dementors were pointing up at him, Harry can't think of any reply, like the truth, so he just shuts up. Fred and George, however, are scowling because they'll have a reply. Sed looks embarrassed. Dad, Harry fell off his broom, Dad. I told you, it was an accident. Yes, but you didn't fall off, did you, son? What are we seeing here?
He is very proud of his son.
Proud father, living kind of vicariously through his son. I think at least that's what's involved. Always modest, our Sed. Always the gentleman. What house?
Hufflepuff.
Okay.
The best house.
But the best man won. I'm sure Harry'd say the same. Wouldn't you, eh? One falls off his broom, one stays on. You don't need to be a genius to tell which one's the better flyer. Well, what are we going to hear at the first Triwizard task?
Harry is the better.
Great Scott! Look at him fly! And he asked, who's saying that, by the way? Ludo Bagman. He says, what? I think he says something like, Crumb, can you see this? Okay. Yeah. So, they talk about the love goods. They're gone a different way. Bagman and Crouch, chapter 7. So, what is Ludo Bagman's involvement in the Quidditch World Cup?
He's sort of the presenter, the organizer. He's kind of in charge of the
MC, essentially, kind of, okay? What's Ludo Bagman's involvement in Quidditch?
He was a famous beater.
Famous beater for the England team, okay? Replace Quidditch with World Cup football, soccer, okay? Americans don't understand sports. I don't care if you're, a football fanatic. It's like, Pee Wee League compared to the rest of the world with football, soccer. I mean, people die at matches because of how much they go crazy over it. It's kind of the same here, all right? So, we get introduced to a variety of people in this chapter. We get kind of introduced to Victor Crumb, not literally, because Ron has what?
A little miniature.
He has a little action figure. Kind of weird, but okay.
What are the implications? Because it's a magical thing, so it's able to move on its own. I feel like there's got to be some kind of ethical implications for action figures that almost seem to have sentience.
There's a lot of ethical implications throughout all of the novels. I mean, there's a lot of ethical issues that she kind of raises, and it's kind of like, okay, does she mean to raise this particular issue? For example, I'll give you one right now. She raises serious ethical issues regarding the law, justice, and the press, the media. Okay. If you didn't think J.K. Rowling didn't like the media at the time she writes this book, or excuse me, if you didn't think she doesn't like it now because of how the media treats her, okay, now, I mean, you can just go back here and see she's already, and I think it's because of primarily The American media, with the publication of the first 3 books and wackos coming out of the woodwork and, burning her in effigy and, all that kind of stuff. So, we see them walking through the campsite, okay? We meet the Robertses as they go into the campsite and stuff. And what do we see little kids doing?
Playing around with
There's
magic.
the one little kid who takes his daddy's wand, and he's got the slug, he's making the slug get big, and making the slug go small, and making the slug go big, and kind of goes against something she's already told us, okay? And it goes against some of the stuff we're told about, wands really, really work well only if it's what? Your own wand, okay?
But also is a big kind of issue that I've noticed with the whole underage magic thing, and you don't need to go into it right now, I get it. But there's a lot of discrepancies that come up with those laws and things we see happen everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's why, I'll beat this horse till it has no flesh left on it. She needs to do a revised edition that takes account, that resolves all of those little flaws, okay? So that people can read it and go, okay, now this is seamless, okay? Because we're going to see the biggest, the most glaring writing error in this book. And it's going to involve the movement of a dead body. Not we're going to see the body move, but a body is going to become dead, and at that point we're going to be told it's like right next to Harry. In the very next paragraph, it is now 20 feet away. Harry hasn't moved, and the body hasn't moved, but it's 20 feet away, according to the narration. What the hell? Bad, first of all, bad writing, even worse, copy editing. But I think at that point, copy editors were told probably, or the copy editor was probably told by Bloomsbury, don't change a word. Why? This thing had something like 7 or 8 million copies sold before you could even see it via Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I mean, it just blew everybody out of the water, okay? And it was because of that the New York Times changed its bestseller list working, okay? So the Quidditch World Cup, they go up to the Weasleys, go up to their seats, top of the stands, okay? And we see 100, 101, 102 following. Interaction with Fudge. Who else?
The Malfoys,
Malfoys.
Crouch's house elf.
In Winky, okay? Bottom of 100. A pale boy with a pointed face and white blonde hair. Draco greatly resembled his father. His mother was blonde too, tall and slim. She would have been nice looking if she hadn't been wearing a look that suggested there was a nasty smell under her nose. In other words, her face was like what? And the implication is she's always like that. Her face is always scrunched up, okay? So we hear about Fudge, or we hear from Fudge that the Malfoys have done what? Major donation, okay? That's why they have the nice seats. 101, Lucius. Good Lord, Arthur. What did you have to sell to get seats in the top box? Surely your house wouldn't have fetched this much, okay? And then Fudge talks about the very generous contribution Malfoy's just given to St. Mungo's. The real name of a real Scottish saint, by the way, okay? Weasley, how nice, okay? Bagman starts the World Cup. We see the World Cup happen, the Quidditch World Cup happen, and it's not important, so we're going to skip all of that. The only thing that's important there is what? What do we get introduced to?
Vila?
The villa. Describe the villa.
They're kind of similar to like sirens in a way. They're just very, very attractive, and they have very, very beautiful voices, and they can kind of ensnare you and
Ensnare who?
Bad.
Let's be more specific. Men. Okay? We're going to see various men, boys, just kind of start drooling as the Vila, appear and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So, Quidditch World Cup ends. Night has descended. And seemingly all hell breaks loose. Pages 118, 119. Okay? And we see on 119, once Harry wakes up, crowd of wizards, tightly packed, moving together with wands pointing straight upward, was marching slowly across the field. Harry squints at them. They didn't seem to have faces. Then he realized their heads were hooded and their faces masked. High above them, floating along in midair, 4 struggling figures were being contorted into grotesque shapes. It was as though the masked wizards on the ground were puppeteers and the people above them were marionettes. 2 of the figures were very small. More and more people are running and joining this group. Okay? The floating people were suddenly illuminated, top of 120, as they passed over a burning tent, and Harry recognized one of them, Mr. Roberts, the campsite manager. The other 3, his wife, and 2 young children. One of the marchers, okay, keep this image in mind and jump, for those of you who have read them, jump mentally to book 6. Is that right? Yes, it is right. One of the marchers below flipped Mrs. Roberts upside down with his wand. Her nightdress fell down to reveal voluminous drawers, and she struggled to cover herself. Ron, that's sick. Is it torture? Is there lasting physical damage to Mrs. Roberts?
No, mental though.
Mental. What is damaged for Mrs. Roberts?
her pride.
Her pride, her honor. Okay? Ron, that's sick. That's really sick. Okay? So, Mr. Weasley says, we're going to go help the ministry. You guys go to the woods. So they start. They run into Draco, page 121. Draco says that Hermione better be careful because they're going after muggles. Okay? Ron tells him to watch his mouth, blah, blah, blah. So they go into the woods. And here is it. Page 129. They go into a clearing, and Ron hears something. One of them hears something, actually page 128. Harry says, hello? He hears a noise. There's silence. Harry gets to his feet. He looks around the tree. Doesn't see anything. Who's there? And then all of a sudden they hear Mors Mordre. Okay? Something vast, green, glittering erupts from a patch of darkness Harry's eyes had been struggling to penetrate. Flew up over the treetops, and what do we see? We see a big giant skull made of emerald stars, green stars, okay, with a serpent protruding from its mouth like a tongue. And it blazes, and then the wood all around them erupts with screams. Harry again calls, who's there? Hermione, come on, Harry, move. Why?
Because Hermione knows.
Hermione knows what it is. What's Harry kind of attempting to do, though? He thinks someone's in trouble, right? Harry asks, what's the matter? It's the dirt mark, Harry. You know who? Voldemort? Harry turns, Ron's hurriedly scooping up his miniature Crumb. The 3 of them started across the clearing, but before they had taken a few hurried steps, they hear... Okay? And a whole bunch of wizards apparate so that you have the three of them in the middle, and the wizards are forming a circle. Really stupid, by the way, strategy-wise.
There you go.
Harry whirls around in an instant, and he realizes all the wizards have their wands out, and every wand was pointed right at himself, Ron, and Hermione. And without pausing to think, he yells, "Duck!" and pulls Ron and Hermione down. Okay? And we hear "stupefy." Okay? Just think about this for a minute. Stupefy. And the wands are now pointing at air, right? So do you have like distance meters on your wand? So that if you only want it to go to the middle of the room, like if Leah was standing here, and I had Wes standing behind her in the back, because he's another wizard, and I go stupefy, she drops. Does the stupefy charm stop in where, or do we have 20 wizards end up, because essentially circular firing squad does what?
Everyone gets
It
hit.
kills everybody, you know. But that's not what happens. It's a logical problem in the writing, okay? So, who do they find?
Winky.
Winky. What does Cedric Diggory suggest? Or, let me rephrase that. What does Barty Crouch Sr. infer from Cedric Diggory's words?
That Barty Crouch taught Winky.
That Barty Crouch taught Winky how to conjure the dark mark. Okay? Somebody taught Winky how to do it, right? Where'd Winky get a wand? Found it? Whose wand is it? Harry's. When did Harry lose it? Did he lose it on his way to the wood? Or did he lose it when he was sitting in the seats at the top of the stadium?
We don't know at this point.
We don't exactly know. Was that seat that they were saving for Karkaroff empty? Okay? So, how does Barty Crouch take that insinuation?
Not well.
Not well. What do we find out about Barty Crouch? First there, and then later what Arthur will tell us. He hates the dark arts. Barty Crouch even says there are only two people in this clearing right now who probably hate that thing more than anybody else. Me. And he says, you know the lengths I've gone to show how much he detests the dark arts. We don't see those lengths, okay, till much later. Who's the other one? Harry, obviously. Notice Harry doesn't remember ever seeing the dark mark. Why?
He probably never did.
He never did, because he was a baby and he was inside the house when the dark mark was conjured over his parents' house. Okay?
Was it? Did it say it was conjured over his parents' house? Because I thought it was after the kill, but Voldemort was, his body was destroyed before he did.
I think we're going to be told later. I may be wrong. My faulty memory is telling me that we get told later, either by Harry or Hagrid, or it's in the pensive, that the dark mark was seen over the Potter's house. I could be wrong. So, go back to the Weasleys, page 141. They're talking about Barty Crouch dismissing Winky and such, and Percy says, Crouch is quite right to get rid of an elf like that, embarrassing him in front of the whole ministry. Hermione, she didn't do anything. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. See, Hermione understands that a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. She, Harry, and Ron have been in the wrong place at the wrong time a few times. Okay? Percy, Hermione, a wizard in Mr. Crouch's position can't afford a house elf who's going to run amok with a wand. She didn't run amok. She picked it up off the ground. Where did Winky get the wand?
Off the ground after someone supposedly.
Off the ground after somebody else. What's the difference between Winky, or how should they know it wasn't Winky?
Because can house elves use wands for magic?
Who heard the voice that said Morse Morgana? Harry, Ron, Hermione. Okay? Describe the voice they heard as opposed to Winky's. Winky sounds like this. Little squeaky mousy voice. Okay? The voice they heard was deep. Morse Mordred. Does that mean house elves can't make their voices deeper? Probably not. That is probably not. It doesn't mean that. But it wasn't the same voice that they heard. Okay? So, Mr. Weasley says it hasn't been seen for 13 years. Okay? People panicked. It was almost like seeing you-know-who back again. Ron, it's just a symbol in the sky. Big freaking deal, right?
Mm.
What's Rowling's point?
Symbols have a lot of power,
Symbols have power.
but also if you don't know what that symbol is, it doesn't have any power.
It means absolutely nothing to you, right? According to mythology, you could, I could walk up to any one of you and show you this, and you're like, oh, big deal, it's got a necklace with a cross on it. But if you're a vampire, what's it do? You back up because the vampire understands the symbolism of it. I could walk up to a card-carrying atheist, let's say, and they go, big deal, so you're superstitious and you believe in a myth of a guy who died. Means absolutely nothing. This, to Ron, who's never seen it before and doesn't understand its history, means nothing. Interestingly, Hermione, raised in a non-magical household, though, it means an awful lot.
Because she's red.
Because she's read about it. Harry doesn't have any idea of its significance. Should he?
Yeah, somebody really should have sat Harry down and just gave him just at least a little primer.
Give him the Cliff Notes
on
version of the
Voldemort's-
history of Voldemort. Yeah.
Just here's some of the things you might need to know at some point.
You see this sign, stay away. If you see this little sign on a door, don't go in.
Yeah.
What's its equivalent in our world?
The swastika?
In one sense, yes. Skull and crossbones, which means what?
Death.
Poison. Go away. Nuclear mushroom cloud? Yes.
I feel like this can relate to a lot of things, especially during this month when it comes to Ouija boards or a pentagram. The majority of us know say that kind of thing.
A pentagram. Okay. So, Mr. Weasley gives Ron a history lesson of sorts. Ron, you know who and his followers sent the dark mark into the air whenever they killed? Notice, it wasn't just used to frighten. It was what for them?
It's a signature.
It's a signature. It's like when a serial murderer leaves a clue or leaves, some kind of mark behind, like when the Zodiac killer would send a letter. Not Ted Cruz, by the way, if you're familiar with that joke. So, why am I calling creepy? No, don't do that. Mayhem at the Ministry. So, he says, the terror it inspired, you have no idea, you're too young. It's the first time, I think, in this book we've heard that. We're going to hear it a whole bunch of times. And then there's going to be a scene with Sirius at Hogsmeade where Sirius is going to say, you're too young. And it's either Harry or Ron's going to say, we're tired of hearing that. Try me. Why don't you? And Sirius gets this almost like a glint thing, Lord of the Rings. Gets his gleam in his eyes like, yes, finally. more of us. The marauders are back, you know. So, picture coming home and finding the dark mark hovering over your house and knowing what you're about to find inside. Everyone's worst fear, the very worst. Lots and lots and lots of foreshadowing right there. Okay? Silence for a moment. Then Bill starts to talk, says it doesn't tell us who conjured it. Harry, Death Eaters? What are Death Eaters? It's what whose supporters called themselves. He's been at Hogwarts, he's in his 4th year, almost, hasn't started yet. Why haven't they heard about this at all?
They're trying to hide it.
Trying to hide it? We can't prove it was them, Bill, says Mr. Weasley. Probably was. Ron, bet it was. Draco Malfoy warned us, Harry, but what were Voldemort's supporters? And everybody, twitches. He's sorry, you know who. What was the point? Harry's question is, what was the point of having the Robertses upside down? The point, says Mr. Weasley? Harry, that's their idea of fun. Half the Muggle killings back when you knew who was in power were done for fun. What does that tell us about those who killed those Muggles?
They're evil.
They're evil. They're sociopaths. Okay? I suppose they had a few drinks tonight, couldn't resist reminding us all that lots of them are still at large. Ron, but if they were the Death Eaters, why'd they disapparate when they saw the dark mark? I mean, wouldn't they have been pleased? Bill, come on, Ron, think. Use your brains. They've been in hiding for 13 years. They have a little fun, and then what happens? Somebody spoils the fun with conjuring the dark mark. Okay? If they really were Death Eaters, they worked hard to stay out of Azkaban. Do you think the true believers would be happy with them? Okay? So Hermione says, whoever conjured the dark mark, were they doing it to show support for the Death Eaters or to scare them away? Notice what didn't happen. The dark mark in the past was conjured when?
After a murder.
Did anybody die at the Quidditch World Cup? No. So, mayhem at the Ministry. Who gets in trouble at the Ministry?
Mr. Weasley,
Why?
because of the statement he gave Rita Skeeter.
Because he spoke to the press. And he wasn't cleared to speak to the press. Who kind of rubs that in?
Percy,
Why?
because Percy's he's a rule follower and he disagrees with what his father did. And Percy's afraid that his father's reputation will tarnish his chances.
Because man. Percy is a ministry man. My government, nothing else. He's entirely 100% behind the ministry. Okay? Notice Mrs. Weasley kind of jumps down his throat, by the way. And just, let's see here. Board the Hogwarts Express. What does Arthur have to do just before they go off to school? Who does he have to go rescue or help? Mad-Eye Moody, who we find out, page 161, Bill says, was a great wizard in his time. In his time, and is telling us what?
He's not so great anymore.
He's past his, obsolete date, so to speak. Old friend of Dumbledore's. Fred says, yeah, but Dumbledore's not normal either, right? I mean, come on. Harry asks who's Mad-Eye. We find out he used to be an Auror, okay? Page 165. Harry overhears Harry, Ron, Hermione. Over here, Malfoy, talking about another wizarding school. Father actually considered sending me to Durmstrang rather than Hogwarts, you know. He knows the headmaster, you see. Well, you know his opinion of Dumbledore. The man's such a mudblood lover. And Durmstrang doesn't admit that sort of riffraff. Why? Because at Durmstrang they do what? You learn the dark arts. Anybody know where the phrase, name, Durmstrang comes from? Sturm und Drang. Storm and stress is what that means. It's a phrase referring to kind of Gothic literature of the 19th century. Don't think Gothic, you know, people dressed all in black with black eyeliner and all that kind of stuff. Gothic in the sense of there's a romance involved, there's usually some kind of magic element or something. Think Goethe's Faust, all right? Or even better yet, which one? Bronte's Wuthering Heights, where you have a ghost, you've got the Scottish moors, you've got a love interest, and it's all this atmospheric, literal storming going around. And the stress is what all of that other stuff puts on the people. So you put them in a cauldron, okay? You put a lid on it and crank up the heat and see how they act. That's where the name Durmstrang comes from. Gives you an idea of how the students are taught. I mean, gotta admit, modern American educational systems pretty namby-pamby compared with what it was like 100 years ago, or with what British education was like 200 or 300 years ago, where the idea of corporal punishment was like breathing. You mess up, you get smacked. Okay? Yes?
Are you just basically implying that today's society is spoon-fed or like babied when it comes to the education system?
Yeah, largely. Okay? I mean, compared to this,
Yeah,
I mean, why do they get taught the dark arts?
So they know how to prepare for it, and it's realistic.
Okay? And because we're going to find out Karkaroff was / is a Death Eater, okay? To give something away. So, Harry's like, what's Durmstrang? Another wizarding school? Hermione, yes, Harry, if you'd read it, book, you know. So, we're going to skip a bunch. Chapter 12, Tri-Wizard Tournament. And we get introduced to, let's see, first book we had a silly song, if you're familiar with VeggieTales, kind of for the Sorting Hat song, okay? Second book we didn't have a Sorting Hat song. Third book we didn't have a Sorting Hat song. Fourth book we get a Sorting Hat song. Fifth book we get a Sorting Hat song. Sixth book, we don't have one. Seventh book, we don't really care about Hogwarts anymore. Page 176, 77. So, McGonagall brings up the stool, sets it down, brings up the old beat, battered hat, sets it down, and the hat starts to sing. 1,000 years or more ago, when I was newly sown, there lived 4 wizards of renown whose names are still well known. Bold Gryffindor from Wild Moor, fair Ravenclaw from Glen, sweet Hufflepuff from Valley Broad, shrewd Slytherin from Finn. So notice, each of the founders is related to a certain kind of topography. Gryffindor from the Highlands, that's the moor, okay? Ravenclaw from Glen, and a glen is a narrow valley with a river down at the bottom. Sweet Hufflepuff from Valley Broad, like a low-lying valley, okay, between maybe hills on either side. And Slytherin from Finn. What's a Finn? Swamp. Marsh. Think mosquitoes, midges, bugs, things like that, okay? They shared a wish, a hope, a dream. They hatched a daring plan to educate young sorcerers. Thus Hogwarts school began. Now each of these four founders formed their own house, for each did value different virtues in the ones they had to teach. By Gryffindor, so Gryffindor, can't pick up my book because it falls apart too much. The bravest, okay, were most worthy of admission, and power-hungry Slytherin loved those of great ambition. Notice, by the way, Slytherin had what applied to him? An adjective, power-hungry. Gryffindor didn't. It wasn't for bold Gryffindor, okay? So, for Ravenclaw, the cleverest, all right, would always be the best. And for Hufflepuff, notice who gets listed last, okay? For Hufflepuff, hard workers. Okay, so we're told they do this because of these virtues. Which of these is not a virtue? Which of them is innate, is a talent? You're born with smarts. That's what's meant by cleverest. It's IQ. Brave? You're not born with bravery. You develop bravery. Ambition? Hard work?
No, because you become a hard worker.
You're trained to do that, okay? But you're not trained to be clever. You either have it or you don't. I mean, you can improve that, but it's, basic, intelligence. So, and we go back to Slytherin again. Gryffindor the bravest were, Ravenclaw the cleverest, Hufflepuff hard workers, power-hungry Slytherin, those of great ambition. How did I get, man, I jumped way down. Sorry, that should be down here. So, think about Hufflepuff being last was wrong. While still alive, they did divide their favorites from the throng, yet how to pick the worthy ones when they were dead and gone. 'Twas Gryffindor who found the way, he whipped me off his head. Who did the hat belong to? Gryffindor. Okay? The founders put some brains in me so I could choose instead. Now slip me snug about your ears. I've never yet been wrong. I'll have a look inside your head and tell where you belong. Cool. Only reason I emphasize that is we get, the first kind of, from the hat itself, history of the house, and we find out the hat belonged to Godric Gryffindor. It's important for Book 7, because there's a flaw. Book 7, we're going to be told there's only one relic of Godric Gryffindor left. All right? What?
There's two.
There are two. Okay.
It's also kind of significant going back to Chamber of Secrets, that we know Harry pulled Gryffindor's sword out of Gryffindor's hat.
And that's when Dumbledore said that, only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that sword from the hat. And I think there's, because there's kind of, in that scene, 3 Gryffindors of sword, the hat, the sword, and Harry. Okay? So, we see people get sorted and such. We find out what about Hogwarts that we didn't know before.
Her house elves at Hogwarts.
And
They make all the food and clean.
they do all the cooking and cleaning. Okay? And who gets on her little high horse and stays there for the whole damn book?
Hermione.
And where does her little high horse go in the remaining 3 books? What happens to spew? I love that. I love that acronym, by the way. What does she do with spew? She, Rowling, in the next 3 books.
Kind of just falls away.
Does nothing with it. And I think it's because she realized she created a problem for herself, okay? Which we'll talk about later, not today. So, Hermione goes on, kind of a hunger strike, et cetera, et cetera. So Dumbledore starts to get ready to mention the Triwizard Tournament, and we have Moody show up. Okay? Describe Mad-Eye Moody. Physically describe him.
He's really beat up.
Old, grizzled, beat up. Chunk of his face is missing. Okay? He's got a magical blue eye. He's been around the block a few times. He's taken a few shots, right? So Dumbledore talks about the Triwizard Tournament, how old it is, what its history is. And he says this year, safeguards have been put into place so nobody will die. It used to be standard practice, people would die, but we're not going to do that, okay? And who can enter the Triwizard Tournament?
Any students who are of age, or 17 years.
Any student who is 17 years old or older. How old are Fred and George?
16 just about.
They'll be 17 in the spring. I think it is.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Not old enough.
It's April Fool's.
Okay? So there will be a Hogwarts house champion, a Durmstrang house champion, and what's the name of the other school? Beauxbaton. What does it mean? Beautiful wand. Or beautiful baton.
An all-girls school.
Is it all-girls school? No, there are some guys.
I thought it was rated as an all-girls school, but then.
Yeah, there's-
school hall it mentions.
Yeah, in the school ball, there are some boys, and there are some boys sitting at the table when the Beauxbaton students come in. Yeah, I don't even remember the movie.
In Durmstrang, it's all boys school, but no, in the books. It's
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to send girls to Durmstrang. Just be dangerous, let's say. So, Mad-Eye Moody. We find out more mistakes at the Ministry of Magic, 202, 203. Okay? Malfoy is mouthing off about the article, and what's so funny to him is, what does the Daily Prophet say about Ron's dad? He's so unimportant, he's so insignificant, they can't even get his name right. Okay? Arnold Weasley. So, Malfoy keeps mouthing off, page 204. And we see Harry do what Harry does naturally. He comes to Ron's defense. Get stuffed, Malfoy. Oh yeah? You were staying with them this summer, weren't you, Potter? Top of 204. So tell me, is his mother really that porky, or is it just the picture? You know your mother, Malfoy? That expression she's got, like she's got dung under her nose, has she always looked like that? Or was it just because you were with her? Ooh. Malfoy's pale face went slightly pink. Don't you dare insult my mother. Keep your fat mouth shut then. And Harry turns his back to Malfoy, thinking, done. Put you down. And what does Malfoy do? Or attempt? He tries to curse Harry. And we get our first real image of Mad-Eye Moody. Bang. Oh, no, you don't, laddie. Harry spins around. There's Moody coming down the staircase. And where Malfoy was is a pure white ferret. Ferrets are about this long. We used to have 2, okay? One of my sons really liked them. And there's Moody coming down, and there's the ferret. Moody asks Harry, did he get you? No. Leave it. Harry's like, not you. And there's Crabbe, who'd just been about to pick up the ferret. Moody starts to limp towards them. Ferret starts to take off. I don't think so. I don't like people who... And every time he says a word, the ferret goes up and wham, slams on the ground. Okay, one time the ferret would be dead. Ferrets are very delicate animals, very delicate. Okay. Professor Moody. So you got two Scots, yelling at each other now. He says, hello to McGonagall. McGonagall, what are you doing? Teaching. Moody, is that a student? Yep. No, Moody, she says. We never use transfiguration as a punishment. Notice she doesn't say we don't use pain as a punishment. Transfiguration is her subject. You don't abuse my subject, So, she says, we give detentions. He says, okay, I'll do that. Snape's your head of house. I'll be having a talk with him. You tell him Moody's keeping an eye on his son. You tell him that from me, okay? Talking about his father. He says, oh yes, Snape, another old friend. Been looking forward to a chat with old Snape. Okay? So, unforgivable curses. So, their first real introduction to Moody has them thinking what about him?
Leslie Potter.
They really like him. Why?
Because they came to his defense and they goofed around with Draco.
He kind of beat the you-know-what out of Draco. And he's not afraid of Draco's father. And he's not afraid of Snape. Oh, this is someone we want in our corner, so to speak. Okay? Unforgivable curses. So, he tells them, first defense against the dark arts class, they're behind on dealing with curses. He says, I've got a year to teach you. Ron, aren't you staying? Been hired for a year. We'll find out why later on. Okay? Later on, different book. You're Arthur Weasley's son. Yeah, just 1 year, special favorite of Dumbledore. So he says, curses, 211. Now remember, earlier, back at the end of the Quidditch World Cup, Mr. Weasley says to them, you're too young. Okay? Bottom of 211. According to the Ministry of Magic, I'm supposed to teach you counter curses and leave it at that. I'm not supposed to show you what illegal dark curses look like until you're in the 6th year. You're not supposed to be old enough to deal with it till then. But Professor Dumbledore's got a higher opinion of your nerves. He reckons you can cope. In other words, Dumbledore doesn't think you're too young. And I say, the sooner you know what you're up against, the better. How are you supposed to defend yourself against something you've never seen? A wizard who's about to put an illegal curse on you isn't going to tell you what he's about to do. Right? Somebody who's going to break the law is not going to stop because it's against the law. Right? So, what are the curses most heavily punished? Several hands rise up. Ron, Imperious. Says, yes, your father would know that one. Gave the ministry a lot of trouble. So, he opens a drawer and he pulls out a big glass jar. And in that big glass jar are 3 spiders. He pulls one out. Ron backs up. Pulls one out. Holds it in the palm of his hand. Imperial. And the spider leaps from his hand on a thread of silk and starts to swing back and forward, like on a trapeze. Everyone's laughing. Think it's funny, do you? You'd like it, would you, if I did it to you? And everybody shuts up. Why? Imagine being 14 years old, seeing that, and have a teacher say, no, I'm going to do that to you. Yeah, that would shut everybody up. Okay? So he talks about, years back, a lot of people claimed they were under the Imperious curse. He said, but it can be fought, and I'll be telling you how. 213, it takes real strength of character. Not everyone's got it. Better avoid being hit with it. Constant vigilance. Okay? Takes that spider, puts it back in the jar. And that spider's going, thank you, Jesus, thank you, Jesus. You know. Anyone else know one? Hermione's hands up because she knows everything. And Neville puts his hand up. Cruciatus curse. Your name's Longbottom. Cruciatus curse needs to be a bit bigger. So he puts the spider under an engorgio charm. Makes it like the size of a tarantula. Okay? Crucio. And the spider falls on its back and its legs curl in and it just sits there and twitches. Meanwhile, Neville's doing this. Okay? Harry notices, Ron notices, Hermione notices, and she says, stop it. Now, Hermione says that because two things. One, what does she see about the spider? It's in pain, okay? And she notices Neville. So, he stops it, shrinks it back to size, puts it back in the jar. Pain. You don't need thumb screws or knives to torture someone if you can perform the Cruciatus curse. That one was very popular once too. And what can you do with the Cruciatus curse and not? How can you use the Cruciatus curse and not get caught? Or, can't think how to phrase the question. It doesn't leave any marks.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
It's not like beating somebody with a truncheon where they're going to end up black and blue. Another one? Hermione. Avada Kedavra? Ah, yes. Pulls out a spider, and what does the spider do this time? It tries to get away from him. It's like, what was that? What Kedavra? I know this one. I've heard this before. And he pulls it out, and he says, Avada Kedavra. But he roars. Why? Do you have to say it at the top of your lungs? No, I think it's for effect. But you do have to really mean it. Okay? Flash a blinding green light, which I think when Harry sees that, he immediately makes the connection. Okay? He's seen that flash of green light before. And a rushing sound as though a vast invisible something was soaring through the air. The spider rolls over on its back, unmarked but unmistakably dead. What is the sound of something rushing through the air? Is that death coming? Or is that life going? Something like that. Not nice, not pleasant, no counter curse, no blocking it. Only one person ever survived it, and he's right there. Thanks. You got to imagine Harry thinks. Because all eyes, once again, are on Harry. So, they go through the rest of the lesson, okay, taking notes on each of the unforgivable curses. What's his next lesson going to be?
He's going to use them on the students.
Well, he's going to use one of them on the student. He's not going to torture anybody, and he's not going to Avada Kedavra anybody, okay? Harry gets a note at the end of that chapter from Sirius. I'm coming north, etc. Page 227. I'm skipping spew. Page 227. Harry thinks, if Sirius came back and got caught, it would be Harry's fault. Why hadn't he kept his mouth shut? A few seconds pain and he'd had to blab if he just had the sense to keep to himself. Why emphasize that?
It's almost his trauma showing because of the fact that he's been in an abusive household, that he's been forced to keep all his emotions like pushed aside.
Okay.
That he feels like everything's his fault if something goes terribly wrong.
Okay, I think that's possible. What else?
He's almost, it's almost an ego. In a
Interesting.
way. Like everything is,
Oh.
he can't really imagine that other people, he doesn't think about the fact that other people have free will and that they can do whatever they want. He's just repeatedly is like, oh, I did this, everything that happens after I do something is directly my fault.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, especially if you connect that with what happens at the end of book 5. Okay? He hasn't learned the lesson. See, seemingly at the end of book 2, Harry's learned a little bit about what Dumbledore said at the end of book 1. At the end of book 3, or at the beginning of book 3, Harry's understood and taken into himself some of what Dumbledore said at the end of book 2. At the beginning of book 4, Harry's not accepting this, I don't control what other people do. What is this? A mental, how would I put this? Which of the unforgivable curses is this a mental expression of? Imperious. By denying other people their ability to act freely, he may as well be taking their will from them. Okay? All right, we'll stop there because it's 9:25. So we'll pick up with Beauxbatons and Bermstrang, and we'll go a lot farther. I don't know that we'll finish on Thursday, but we will go a lot farther.